What's the secret sauce to getting a center of excellence funded? Because the perception can be we're just adding overhead to the organization. Welcome to another episode of the Procurement Mastermind podcast. My name is Omid Gamami, and I have here with me Nicola Pasaka, and he is the Chief Procurement Officer of Telia. Nicola, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. Thanks, Omid, for having me.
Oh, fantastic. So your background to me is fascinating, and you're the second guest I've had so far that's a center of excellence expert. And I'm starting to see these crop up inside Fortune 500 companies. And so I want to know, and the viewers want to know, what does a center of excellence mean to you in the procurement context?
For me, it means common processes, common systems, common tools, an organizational capability that would actually help the organization, so sourcing, procurement, supply chain, but as well the wider group organization to be more efficient. The center of excellence for me is really about that, is about consolidating all of that, consolidating all of those decisions around system, processes, people, and then disseminating it across the organization in form of best practices in process, market intelligence, promoting collaboration. So it's really all about that.
Okay, that's really cool. And I've always been a big fan of that kind of thing. I also ran the operations side of the house for Intel Corp for a number of years for their procurement organization. And one of the challenges I always saw was that people like this, the kind of people you're talking about, who are not actually negotiating deals, right? They're enabling it. It was hard to get them funded because when you're trying to get somebody who's actually negotiating deals funded, to get the headcount, you can say, if you fund this person, I'm going to save you this much money. What's the secret sauce to getting a center of excellence funded? Because the perception can be we're just adding overhead to the organization. So what's that secret sauce to get something like this in place and funded?
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's actually a common misconceptions. And beyond my procurement and sourcing background, I've got as well a shared services background where consolidating transactional activities and building up actually efficiency was part of my role. So I think for me, it's kind of obvious that if you actually build a proper center of excellence, there is strategic long-term value. So definitely it's not immediate cost reduction. It will not drive immediate cost down, but it will help you building capabilities, optimizing process, driving innovation, and driving better use of your resources. So it's like your sourcing managers, your procurement managers will actually deliver a lot more value if they have the right support. And I think it's really how you justify it. It's really a holistic approach to the company established sourcing strategy. It's enabling better control over suppliers. It's enabling better leverage of your existing procurement teams. It's optimized tools. It's actually put in place best-in-class solutions. So all of that, I think, cannot be done by procurement managers who are focusing on delivering day-to-day deals. And that should be their job. But then to do that, we actually equip them with all of those things that the COE is working on. And that's a value proposition you have to articulate to say, well, actually, yes, it's not going to deliver direct cost reduction, but your sourcing managers, instead of delivering 10x, they will deliver 20x because they've got the right support in place.
Yes. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. Is that the value is getting delivered by the organization that the people in the organization that you're enabling. So that's kind of what I'm hearing on the ROI. And of course, we're competing head to head against sales organizations who we're negotiating with, and they're doing these kind of things too. They invest tremendous amounts in people, process, systems, tools. Now, one of the key challenges that I see is where do you draw the line between what the people in the center of excellence do and what the people that they're enabling, the buyers, the commodity managers, and so forth. Where do you draw that line and how do you draw it? Because there's a couple of things at play. One is, what are the core things that make sense to centralize? But the second is, how do you not centralize so much that you're in essence taking the wrench away from the mechanic and they forget how to turn the wrench. So where do you draw that line?
Yeah, no, that's actually a very good question. And I think you need definitely, it's a thin balance. You actually need to adjust it and you need to keep monitoring that. For me, the procurement professional, the guy who are facing the business, facing the supplier, they are really your engine, as you said. They will be the one identifying suppliers, identifying needs, working with stakeholders, putting to competition together, negotiating, and then up to contract and supplier management. And that's actually their core expertise, skills, and work. Then the COE, because they are actually more in the background around best practices, market intelligence, and all of those elements that needs to be in place, I think they have a specific expertise that the procurement professional, the sourcing managers actually should be leveraging. For me, like 80% of the work should be happening into the hands of those procurement or sourcing managers. Then the 20% that gets more complex when you need actually specific expertise, then they should be leveraging the center of excellence. And that's why I'm not a great fan of saying, well, we actually have negotiation expert in a procurement CO, because I don't think it's the right place. I think it needs to be with procurement professional as an example, where if you actually think, well, that's actually system process, market knowledge, maybe specific expertise on how to build total cost of ownership models and etc. could sit in a center of excellence. And that's actually a model which is not set in stone either. There is as well parameters in there about your industry, your company, the maturity of your teams. Sometimes it's actually easier to build a COE and have more knowledge and expertise in the COE because your team is actually not mature enough yet. But then once your procurement professionals are getting more mature, then you would actually shift back some of the work to those professionals actually. So it's as well, there's a bit of that as well. It's not one that you say, well, I'm going to do it that way and it's going to be for the next 10 years.
Yes. I like your 2080 approach. That really makes sense. And it's the 20 that you can create at the core, sort of the core capabilities that can create the greatest benefit. And so speaking of that, how about you tell us what are some of the biggest challenges that you run into, and then what are some of the biggest benefits? And if you have any stories to tell or examples of breakthroughs, that would be great for our listeners and viewers to learn about.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, and I'll start by the challenges. I think one of them is definitely change management. When you actually start the journey to build a COE, you are going to introduce new technology, new sourcing practices. You might actually take away of the work from your procurement managers. And that's actually when you need the right level of buy-in. You need to explain the story. You need actually to show to the people what's in it for them, basically, into that journey. So the change management is actually a very important one. The leadership commitment is one, and that you could link that to change management as well. As a CPO, yes, you would buy into that, but you need your leadership team to buy into it. You need to explain it as well to the stakeholder that will interact as well with that COE. So you actually have to have that buy-in as part of your change management. The staffing is another one as well. I think you definitely want the right level of expertise, the right people sitting in there. And all of that comes obviously with budget constraints. And one of the things actually that I've faced many times is actually how do you, when you put the value proposition, everybody is actually quite interested. Then you start talking about expertise and you want actually expert in a COE, and then it comes with some financial constraints. And that's one of those where it's actually a little bit difficult sometimes to just link all of that and say, well, yeah, you are going to create value in 6, 9, 12 months time. But then right now it's a cost. It's a cost to the organization. But that's actually pretty typical as well in any kind of, shared services, center of excellence. When you actually start to set something up, you actually have a journey that you need to go through. And then when you talked a little bit about, real life example, I think it's one where, as a company, and it's not in Telia, but it was actually before in another world, basically, where we actually started building that up. And then we relied on a few people, especially in the data and analytics space. And one of the things we did wrong is what we talked about earlier, is the balance in between how much knowledge stays with your procurement teams and how much goes into the center of excellence. And we actually have a shared services, a competitor who set up a shared services next to us, and they've actually hired our entire team, and they all left more or less on the same day. And we lost all of the expertise and all of the knowledge. And I think the lesson from that is one, we didn't have the right balance. I think we should probably have left more expertise into the procurement team disseminated. And secondly, you need as well to build a backup plan. And that actually can come from location strategy. It can come as well from some retention element from different angles. But that one, well, hurted us quite a lot, actually.
I think it's also, when somebody leaves and all the knowledge goes with them, the other lesson that has to come with it is, how do we not keep everything in between their ears? Because then it becomes tribal knowledge instead of having a knowledge management system, right? Now, you talked about change management, and this one, I think, I'm so glad you said it because it's one of the most underrated components of being a leader. You're chief procurement officer, so you're entitled to drive mandates. But in my experience, mandates have to be used very, very sparingly. And in order to drive change management, most of the time mandates don't work. It's an influence model, and it's establishing ambassadors and coalition building and things like this. So tell us a little bit more about change management and how you handle that, so the organization gets behind you, not because they have to, but because they want to, and they share your vision.
Yeah, no, that's and I agree. I think change management is one of the largest, and it's not specific, I guess, to COE. I think it's a lot of what we do, and it goes back to, well, what's in it for me, basically. So for me, there is a lot about transparency, comprehensive communication plan, setting up a vision, and sharing that vision so everybody understand where we are going. And then building up the strategy to get to that vision. So is explaining the road we're going to take to get to that vision and why actually we are going to take that road, why that vision is important. And then you just assemble the element around that, your employee training, your stakeholder engagement, and then you as well build feedback mechanism into that, basically. But it's really a communication journey. I think change is a lot about transparency, about governance, about communication. And that's actually what makes a difference in between something that works and something that fails. Actually, a lot of the time is the misunderstanding, the lack of communication, the unclear objective or the conflicting objective that actually drive the plan out. And that's one. There is no magic elements in there. I think it's actually hard work, and it's actually focusing on ensuring that you actually talk first, but listen as well to those feedbacks, and then keeps working on all of those elements until you get to a point where you all align, look in the same direction, and go through the journey together with your stakeholders and sometimes with your suppliers as well. I think you just need to define what's the right ecosystem to actually align.
Two things you said jumped off off the page to me. One is you said talk first and listen well. Because I think one of the elements of the secret sauce, just to highlight what you said, is people are more apt to support a solution when they feel they had input into it. And it's my experience that the solution doesn't have to reflect their input, as long as they feel like the process was genuine and they had a voice and their voice was listened to and their feedback was internalized. And then they're more apt to support. And the second thing that jumped off for me was about involving suppliers. And procurement, in my experience, is notorious for thinking that they must be an internal fountain of knowledge. And in fact, many of the mistakes we make, suppliers see them coming from a mile away, but they do what we contract for them to do. And suppliers are taught, salespeople are taught, their number one rule is the customer is always right. So if the customer wants to do things in an inefficient fashion or in an incorrect fashion, or something that's perhaps even going to result in a train wreck, sometimes suppliers just do what they're told to do. So I think it's that input process is very valuable.
Yeah, no, it is. And actually well, the two things you said, and you just mentioned that, where I said talk first and listen, but I think actually in reality is like 20% talk and 80% listen. So yes, you
Yeah.
need to talk first, but you need actually to be more on a listening mode. And then suppliers, yeah, I agree with you. And it's a lot about training your team first, but then as well, training your suppliers to be able to challenge you. I think they quite often know more about your company than you know yourself. And then you need to leverage that knowledge. And then they have actually as well a wide range of customers who are similar, who might be actually in different industries as well, but face similar challenge. So, and that's actually a huge pool of knowledge you should be leveraging too.
Yes, that's tremendous insight. So now, in the last year or so, AI has changed the landscape of everything. I mean, I know I use it multiple times a day in my personal and professional life. And I have to believe AI is going to become increasingly at the core of this COE concept. And I think AI is going to start doing cost models for us, running bids, doing benchmarking, writing contracts. And the only thing I don't know is where it will stop and what the limits are. And so, where do you see the limits of this? Where do you see the potential, and how does it fit in with your center of excellence model, which over time may become less people intensive and more AI intensive? What do you think?
Yeah, and I fully agree with that. And I'm actually as well a user as well, personally or professionally. But I think for me, AI is definitely not a threat. It's really definitely something that's gonna augment rather than replace, whether it's a COE or the procurement team. I think it's just setting up the right frame, focusing on the right use case, and then developing that basically. But
Yeah.
definitely, we would have actually augmented procurement managers with AI. They need to understand what AI is about, the limitation of AI as well. We should be careful about hallucinations, about some data concerns. There is definitely things that people need to understand on why and how they should be using it and how they should be careful about using it. But then at the end of the day, it's going to make their work more strategic. And that's the difference. I think we would probably not do data crunching and, well, trying to scan for information and all of those tasks, which might be administrative. They are already partially automated. I think we've actually leveraged different form of AI to get to a point where today a lot of the administration is already done by AI. But I think going forward, it will be even more. It will be more added value work that might actually be treated by AI. But then we will always need actually people to actually build the relationship with the stakeholders, with the suppliers, to challenge needs, to do those strategic activities, which AI will provide input to. But then that would be actually the human part that will make a difference in between high performers and the company who are going to be laggard.
You're absolutely right. And I'm going to get to the business units topic in a second, but you're absolutely right. AI is never going to solve that problem of business unit engagement and alignment and things like that. Now, speaking of problems or challenges, let's say, um, all major supply chains are being challenged with regulatory compliance and driving sustainability practices. It's only going to become a bigger and bigger agenda. And so I imagine that your center of excellence has to be an enabling component of this. And so, what role do you see the COE playing in this, and how do you enable the success of these initiatives?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's going to get more complex by the day. I think that's why the theory plays an important role in there. The first role is to actually identify the applicable rules and regulation, and then to translate that into what does it mean for your business? What does it mean for sourcing and supply chain? What does it mean actually with the relationship to your suppliers? And that's a work which, said like that, seems very easy, but it's actually quite complex because it keeps evolving. And then sometimes translating a EU regulation in something meaningful for your sourcing manager is not something which is easy. And that's the first step. I think that's definitely that is to be compliant, then identify the rule, translate that rule into something which is meaningful for the organization. And then after that comes actually, how are you going to embed that? How do you change your processes? How do you get the right data structure? You'll be able to report on those new regulations and rules. And that's that entire piece of work sits in a COE by nature, because that's actually things which are common to all of sourcing and supply chain, procurement and supply chain, and actually to your company as a whole. I think when you, and whether you talk sustainability, you talked GDPR at the time, I think that the kind of things where that's the work that needs to be happening, to be structuring it first and then implementing it afterward. And that's definitely, by definition, a great fit for a COE.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And something we didn't talk about, but it just strikes me right now. You know, what I see with procurement organizations consistently is they're spending 70 to 90%. And when I say they, I mean from top to bottom, 70 to 90% of every day in unplanned activities. And it strikes me that the better your center of excellence is, the more you can reduce the number of unplanned activities and allow the organization to be able to be laser focused on commodity management, negotiation strategy, contract management, and these kind of things. Am I off in this quick assessment?
No, you're perfectly right. I think you want actually your team to be proactive and to build, to have actually a pipeline in front of them, to have category strategy that's actually looking forward into what's actually the next product generation, the next suppliers you want to look at. But it comes with a lot of challenge. I think, yes, the center of excellence can help. But then that's where I think the difference in between an expert procurement manager and a more junior one makes a difference as well, because it comes as well with understanding business unit challenges, talking with stakeholders, leveraging AI to get the right level of information. So all of that, yes, the center of excellence will give you tools and systems and process and can equip you and train you, but then it's actually the procurement manager that actually goes out and build that up. And then if you want to go to that, let's call that value creation journey. So beyond just being an RFP processing person, actually that's where you have a difference in between your average and your high performers into your teams. So COE, yes, but actually that's one of those, because we were talking about what should stay into your procurement team. That's a great example of an area where it should actually building up that category management, that proactiveness or strategy is definitely something that actually should stay with your procurement teams.
Yes. And it further strikes me that, you know, one of the challenges I've seen historically in procurement is we struggle with tribal knowledge, what I call tribal knowledge, which means you have people running around. There was an expression I heard years ago, which was, if we only knew what we knew, you know, meaning we have these pockets of knowledge. And a good COE ought to be able to establish that core knowledge management system, so that if there's one person who has 35 years experience, then somehow the organizational capability is elevated in that fashion, as opposed to that individual person's results exclusively being elevated.
Yeah, and going back to what we talked about earlier about AI, that's where AI can help as well, because you can build that knowledge base, but then how do I make it available for procurement managers to leverage it? And that's where building prompts and having structured data can help actually to, well, first having that knowledge base available and captured, and then secondly, well, make it available and easy for the people to actually use that knowledge and leverage it.
Yes. So now I said I would get back to business units. So, you know, we have this perennial challenge in procurement, which has not changed in the 30 years or so that I've been in the profession. And that is, you know, the type of things you're going to see with business units is, you know, engaging late, pre-cooking deals, over-engineering potentially, creating the wrong solution to solve a problem. You know, the solution may work, but it may not be the most cost effective, or it may not be the most, the lowest TCO or whatever. And so what role, if any, does the COE play in helping solve the issue or the opportunity of business unit engagement and alignment improvement?
Quite a significant role, I would say, and I'll try to summarize that like in 4 different areas. Is one, the CEO would help to align the procurement organization with the company-wide objectives. You actually need to just understand what the company vision strategy is and translate that into procurement terms and train your team and share with your team so to make sure they understand that. That's one element. The other one is around communication. How do you communicate procurement value? Why is it important to involve procurement? What actually are we bringing in terms of business value? And going back to the company objectives, how do you relate those two and share that with your internal teams in procurement, but your business units as well, your stakeholders? And I think that's really something which is important. The third one, I think, is really around helping the procurement team to build strong internal relationship, put the right structure in place so they've got stakeholder management tools. They can actually understand where the money is spent, who are the stakeholders, what are their decision level, how they should be engaging, get as well visibility into their plans. So how do you help them to just build that relationship? And then the last, and I think it's quite an important one as well, is review that state of alignment on a regular basis. And I think that's about, let's call that keeping the finger on the pulse of a business is really about that, reviewing regularly that alignment still works in between the sourcing objective, the company objectives, the business unit challenge, and then linking that to how do you share that with your procurement teams?
Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to just focus for a second on one thing you said, which was establishing the value of procurement. And I think, to me, if I was to pick a singular point that's caused the lack of substantial or acceptable progress in this whole business unit alignment journey in our profession, is that procurement tends to focus on their perspective for what the value is they bring to the table instead of why the business unit should care. And this is we're not in the business of sales, so we're not very good at it, right? But you always have to be looking at it, not what's in it for me in procurement and don't you appreciate this value, but rather what's in it for you as the business unit. Well, if you engage me early, I can help you better achieve your objectives and get better metrics and leave more money left over in your budget and these kind of things, and focusing on their organizational objectives and how they get better met. Does that resonate with you?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's really about that. Put yourself into your stakeholder shoes, understand their challenge, and then explain how what you do is going to create value. It can be cash flow, it could be customer satisfaction, it could be EBITDA, and all of that we are actually working on. We are delivering activity that will have an impact on revenue growth, on cost, on cash flow, on satisfaction, on a number of things. And it's not always obvious in stakeholders' mind, that link. And I think that's where it's actually important to articulate that back to them. So to make them supporters and to make them actually great business partners as well to us.
I got it. Yeah, that's absolutely, we're in line with this. So now let's say I'm a chief procurement officer of a company. I love what you're telling me, and I decide I want to start my own center of excellence. So what's your guidance? What's the, again, I'll ask for the secret sauce. Where do you start and how do you drive a highly successful center of excellence inside a company if it's something I want to do?
Well, I think I would say you need first to think about a clear vision. Where do you want to go actually? Why actually do you want to build that center of excellence? What is it going to bring to procurement and to the organization as a whole? Then you'll have to prioritize as well. You can't go big bang and do everything in January. So where actually are you going to invest first? So you actually go get those low-hanging fruit and then you justify building it up. So that's actually prioritization is an important one. And I would say focus on value creation is exactly what it's about as well. I talked earlier about, well, maybe your sourcing manager or procurement manager, instead of returning 10x, would be returning 20x if you equip them with the right tools, process system that the CEO is going to build. And that's where actually you need to build your, let's call that selling argument, because that's internal sales you are going to do into building that. So that's actually how I would say it. Clear vision, definitely build up leadership commitments. Then just prioritize what you go after first, and then keep building it up. Continuous learning, adaptation, robust system to measure success. I think there will be things that will help you going from that small part you're going to focus on first, and then keep building that model until you get to something which actually is mature and will deliver actually value. So it's I would say it's a bit the same than when you try to articulate the entire value proposition for procurement. You would do exactly the same for the CEO. Is actually what value is it going to bring if I actually do that into a center of excellence? Why actually it's going to create more value than doing it disseminated across the organization or across your procurement teams. So that's that piece really for me, the best piece of advice. And well, it goes back a little bit as well into what's in it for them as well. And what's in it for them might be me as a CPO, what's in it for me, but it might be actually finance, it might be actually sustainability teams and like that. What are they going to get out of that COE that they don't have today? Or how more efficient will it be for them to work with a COE instead of a disseminated team? So think a lot about that as well.
So there's a couple of big nuggets I got from that. One is focus on the ROI that you enable and use that to justify. You talked about the vision and establishing what you want to try and accomplish, what's in scope and what's out of scope. And then also you had talked about how do we leverage this organization and how do we start it small? I think that was the other big takeaway is how do we start small and deliver some quick wins and establish the value and then perhaps get a coalition behind it. People say, yes, this works. Let's grow it. Let's add more headcount. As opposed to justifying a monolithic organization to start and then trying to move this unwieldy beast to generate results. Very savvy insight. Now, the final question that I ask of all of my guest speakers, and you're the perfect person to answer, as you've made it up the path to Chief Procurement Officer. We have listeners and viewers out there who want to become Chief Procurement Officers. What's your number one advice to them to put their career on that fast track, to put their career on the track to become a CPO themselves?
I think for me, the world of procurement is ever evolving, and staying at the forefront require a commitment to learn new skills. So for me, it's a lot about that. Understand emerging trend and adapting to change. And it's applied whether you are at the start of your career or already aiming for a leadership role or being already a CPO. Actually, the success in procurement is not about what you know today, but prepare for what's coming tomorrow. So keep talking to people, network, leverage the expertise of others, keep that learning journey on. And I think the more you'll be doing that, the readier you are going to be for the coming challenges. And then that's where actually you'll provide additional value and you'll seen as someone that got the right expertise, skills, experience, leadership to be able to actually build to a CPO role.
That's great. Nicola, this was one of the best sessions. I love the insight you provided. I really appreciate your joining us. And just a message to our listeners and viewers, if you want to put your career on the fast track, the CPSCM certification program we have absolutely focuses on how to establish procurement as a value-added center of profit and the key strategies to be able to put your career on the CPO fast track. Over 40% of the Fortune 100 have invested in the CPSCM, and we invite you to join the best in the world today. So thank you again, Nicola, for being with us. Fantastic session, and bye for now to all of our viewers.
Thanks, Omid, and bye to all of our viewers.